In the Eastern Mediterranean, ongoing geopolitical instability, particularly in the Middle East, continues to obstruct the advancement of critical cross-border energy and climate cooperation. Conflicts such as the Gaza war and confrontations involving Iran have diverted attention and resources away from long-term regional priorities like energy transition and climate adaptation. However, several major infrastructure and energy initiatives offer potential pathways for cooperation. Realizing these projects depends on the calming of regional conflicts and the re-establishment of trust among key players. Ariel Ezrahi shares his insight on both the obstacles created by regional conflict and the untapped potential for cross-border climate and energy cooperation. Ariel is a non-resident senior fellow with the Atlantic Council. He was the first director of energy at the Office of the Quartet, where he led efforts across conventional and renewable energy, as well as broader sustainability initiatives. Ariel was the architect of the Gas for Gaza project, chairing its task force and working closely with the Netherlands, the EU, Qatar, Israel, and the US. He previously served as energy advisor to former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair in his role as Quartet representative, and earlier in his career worked with international law firms advising on major energy and infrastructure transactions across the Middle East and North Africa.
Hi, so good morning. My name is Ariel Ezrahi. I'm a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council in Washington, D.C. Formerly, I was the architect of the Gas for Gaza project, which I started when I was working as Tony Blair's energy advisor when he was Quartet representative. And most recently now I am a head of energy and climate for a New York-based fintech fund. It's my great pleasure to be here today and to be talking to you a little bit about what I see happening in the Eastern Mediterranean, some of the geopolitical changes that we've seen, and the potential for energy and climate-related cooperation. I'll start by saying that one of my biggest concerns, being a child of the Middle East myself, although now I'm based in Berlin, is just saying that we have, as a matter of course, we have regularly and fairly predictably almost, I dare say, conflicts in the Middle Eastern part of the Eastern Mediterranean, I would say, so the part which is more the Middle East. And we have conflicts in other parts as well, but certainly when it comes to the Middle East, Middle Eastern countries that form part of the Eastern Mediterranean, and those that have impact on it, we're seeing that conflict is really a regular theme. And the reason that's of major concern for me, apart from the obvious loss of life and loss of hope, and for many of the people in the region, I have another concern, which is basically the fact that this distracts from our efforts in the region, from working on energy cooperation across borders, and very importantly, on climate mitigation and adaptation across borders. Because what tends to happen is when we see these conflicts emerge, like the recent Iran-Israel-US conflict, the Gaza war, etc., we see that there is a massive focus on that for obvious reasons. As I said, there's a terrible loss of life and all the rest of it. But then if anybody wants to talk about, what are we doing to deal with the rising temperatures in the region, then the attention span of many people is not really there because they're focusing on the immediate. And I think that is a concern because it seems that for now, for the time being anyways, conflicts in the Middle East, at least part of it, less so in other parts of the Eastern Mediterranean, but in the Middle East, are here. Some of the conflicts in the Middle East have taken different turns. Some, whilst we don't see a resolution necessarily of them, certainly not in the near term, there is potentially a trajectory for doing so. But this means that as long as we have live conflicts in the region, the ability to focus on the building blocks of saving our planet and the impacts of climate change and what we need to do also in the energy transition sphere across borders really takes second priority. I wrote a piece for the Atlantic Council. I wrote a report on energy and climate sustainability roadmap for the region. And the reason I did that was really approaching it not from a political place, but really from a energy requirement and a climate mitigation adaptation requirement place. And the whole idea was to really look at what is actually needed, not what can we do in the current political environment or what do you do if we have peace in the Middle East, but what's actually needed technically, project-wise, initiative-wise in the region. And there's many wonderful, exciting initiatives in the region, but we just need to make sure that both policymakers as well as private sector, of course, and various players have the attention span and the energy to be investing in this direction. One example of such initiative is, of course, the IMEC corridor from India through the Persian Gulf and then eventually to Europe via Israel. This is a potentially very exciting project. I know that the Europeans and the Americans, the Indians, the Emiratis, and others have been very much involved in this. I know the Israelis have been supportive of it, and organizations like EcoPeace have been playing a very important role in facilitating such initiatives, which tie in very well with planned projects such as the Euro-Asia corridor to Europe. I think it's worth saying a word or two about the current geopolitical context that we're facing. We've had this recent war with Iran. We have an ongoing war in Gaza. I think what we're seeing, or at least what I'm seeing, is several things coming out of that. One is we see that the United States has not necessarily withdrawn from the region, as we've seen with the recent U.S. involvement with the war with Iran, and this can have implications for the future and for a future U.S. engagement in the region. We've seen a weakened Iran, and certainly its weakened proxies. Thankfully, the terrorist organizations of Hezbollah and Hamas have been decimated, and the Houthis have also seemed to have received major, become weak significantly as a result of various things. Involvement of sort of the Israelis and the Americans, etc. In that regard, and of course, a weakened Iran, most importantly. And this has implications for the region because if we see that there is a weakened Iran and a sort of less of an ability of Iran to cause trouble in the region by promoting various conflicts, then there is more of a chance that we could try to focus more on cross-border peace-building efforts, but also, importantly, projects in the energy and climate sphere. Countries such as Israel also have a role to play. The current Israeli government has not been seen as one by many in the region, including many of Israel's friends and allies in the region and abroad, as a government of which one can do business with. Not peace-wise, but also project-wise. Projects which have been on the table and have been, some of which have reached implementation, like the Gas for Gaza project and projects like Project Prosperity, another very exciting project, have not moved forward in recent years, months, because of the conflicts and also policies of the current Israeli government. So I think that once we see a realigned Iran, or at least an Iran which is not warmongering in the region, or is at least more curtailed in its pyromaniac ambitions, and if we see a change in Israeli government, or at least a major change in Israeli policy in Israel, which is one which seeks to resolve the Palestinian issue, the Palestinian conflict, but also would enable there to be bridges built across the region, including Israel and its Arab neighbors, then I think that a lot of these projects, wonderful projects, that I mentioned, whether it's Gas for Gaza, Project Prosperity, the export of hydrogen from Neom in Saudi Arabia, potentially via Jordan, Israel, Gaza, etc. All of these wonderful things, which can have a massive impact on the region, and I believe one day will, can really come to fruition and can really take center stage. But for that to happen, we really need to see a cessation of conflict, or at least a major reduction of the conflict that we're seeing, or the levels of the conflict that we're seeing. We've been witnessing the last few months, already this summer, really record heat waves in the region. And I think that that is something which is not going to go away. Unfortunately, it's going to get worse. And whilst there may be, you know, uh, political conflicts and military conflicts in the region, climate change doesn't take that into account. Climate change doesn't care about whether uh, the conflicts have been resolved or not, or whether the Iran nuclear facilities have been taken out or not, or whether there is a pathway to a Palestinian state or not. All of these things are irrelevant to climate change. Climate change is a scientific fact. We're seeing the global warming happening, particularly at a really worrying scale in the Middle East. So, in that sense, I think when we see that there is more of a calming of some of the conflicts that we've been seeing, there will be more space for looking at cross-border projects. And as I said, there have been many of them. When we look also additionally at other parts of the Mediterranean, further away from the Middle East, so we have, of course, the Cypriot issue. And once again, I believe that the weakening of Iran could have an impact on President Erdogan of Turkey's policies in the region, or at least I hope. I hope that a weakening of Iran could mean that he will take a more pragmatic approach towards the Cypriot issue, and that there can be some sort of work potentially with the U.S. leadership and European and others to resolve this issue. Because as we all know, resolving the Cypriot issue will be very important to enable a lot of the, particularly gas projects and others in the Eastern Mediterranean that involve Cypriot waters to take place. In that context, also worth mentioning, great hopes for Lebanon and their development of their gas fields. Again, I say gas as a context of a transition. We'd like to transition eventually out of gas, but certainly for some of the developing contexts, for them to be able to exploit the resources, and particularly as Lebanon now seems to be on a path to a sort of brighter future, again, with a weakened Hezbollah, and the Lebanese taking more control of their destiny, then I think there could be a lot of excitement in that way. So I think the geopolitics is potentially going in the right direction. We have to watch that space. Certainly, as I said, with the weakened Iran, we have to see what happens on the Israeli side, the Palestinian side. We have to see what European Union policies are in the coming months, and the continuous role of the United States and Arab countries. We need to have an end finally of the Gaza war. And I think if we see a move towards these things, then these projects can come to some sort of realization, or at least continue the path of realization where they stopped. It's also very, very important to mobilize climate finance, both from public sources, but also private. I mean, I believe, in my current job, I work very much on climate finance issue. And one of the real issues, one of the big challenges that we see is mobilizing sufficient climate finance to have a successful energy transition. A lot of wonderful innovations is going to come from the private sector, from private companies, and we need to do all that we can, both in public and in private ways, to support that. I'll pause now.